Hi, I'm Pat Iyer, and welcome to Legal Nurse Podcast. In this episode, we're going to be revisiting one of our more popular sessions from our LNC Success online conference. You'll have an opportunity to meet Annie Gough, who is a certified medical illustrator with a master's degree in medical illustration, and she shares some fascinating examples of using the power of medical illustrations to convey critical information in a visual way to the trier of fact. This is an episode that is best viewed on our YouTube channel at Legal Nurse Business. Annie shares many fascinating examples of how she uses her skills to convey the information that makes a key difference in helping a jury, a judge, understand what happened to an individual. So go to YouTube and look up the Legal Nurse Business channel. You, of course, can listen to this in an audio form, but you'll get a lot more from it when you watch it visually. Thanks a lot. Stay tuned, and you will now meet Annie Gough. Welcome to our afternoon opportunity to gain some pearls of wisdom and inspiration from the work of Annie Gough. Annie is a certified medical illustrator. She went to college to Georgia, to one of the only 4 programs in the country that provide a Master's of Science degree in medical illustration. And she had an opportunity to work in-house with a very large, prestigious plaintiff firm, handling all of their medical illustrations that they used. She continues to now work as a freelancer with law firms, handling illustrations for demand letters, depositions, trials, mediations, and a variety of other opportunities. Annie came to us by way of Susan Hybeck, who told me one day, Pat, I just got this great book written by this medical illustrator, and I went out and bought it and then said, oh my goodness, this is impressive. Annie's holding it up for us. Then I met her in person in Louisville this year, bought a copy of her book to give to one of my best plaintiff attorney clients who loved it and wanted to bring her into our community to be able to share her knowledge. Annie, please take it away.
Thank you, Pat. Can you hear me okay?
We
Fantastic. I wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to speak with everyone. And I'm really glad that I was able to hear the end of Barbara's discussion with, I believe, Robert, because they talked about skeletons. And I always have my skeleton here. And at the end, what I caught, Barbara was also starting to touch on demonstrative aids and having 3D models. And I'm going to expand on that and having visuals and how having visuals can simplify your job. So much so because it can be daunting and nerve-wracking and sometimes not fun to teach attorneys complex medicine because like us, the attorneys haven't gone to medical school and there's a lot that it's hard for them to understand. Not only do you in your job need to teach the attorney, but you also need to educate the jury, which means you need to be engaging and sometimes entertaining, and illustrations and visuals help with that. And because I only have 30 minutes, I'm not going to have a lot of time to get into what medical illustration is and who medical illustrators are. So if you want to reach out to me, I'm going to have my email here in just a second. Feel free to reach out. But what I want to do is just show you some case examples of how when you have illustrations during your testimony or during your meetings with your attorneys, how it will make your job so much easier because your medical illustrator can solve problems for you. I am going to share my screen with you, and I want to make sure, can everyone see this?
We can.
Okay, great. This is my email address. So if you want to know more about medical illustrators or the master's programs from medical illustration school or that kind of stuff, just please reach out. And Injury Illustrated is the name of the book, if you want to find the book that Pat was referring to as well. All right, let's get started. Medical records, and quite often voluminous medical records. What do you do with these when you need to summarize this and teach it to someone else? So let's talk about what is most commonly the biggest problem is a really voluminous chronology. And you can't really present the paper or the words, but if you have pictures, it's really easy. So here's your client's normal leg. There is a fracture. There is a repair. And it's a non-union. It's not doing well. So the knee is replaced. And the knee is replaced, but there is another fracture distal to the total knee replacement. Then they have to repair that. Hold on. I'm going to minimize this really quick so I can see my screen better. So then there's a repair to the next fracture. And then there's another fracture. And then this is where your client is now. So maybe you can tell how having this illustration of the chronology of your client's leg helps simplify the story when you're going through this with your attorney or when you're speaking with the jury. Okay, how do I want to say this? I present this case a lot when I speak, and some of you may have already seen me speak before. And in my promo, I also showed this case, but I'm going to present this in a way I never have before. I'm going to present it backwards so you understand my process. So when we get the voluminous medical records, we also get the radiology, MRIs, CTs, X-rays, ERCPs, you name it. We get everything. And this is our proof. This is our black and white proof, just like the record. And so this is what I start with. I start with the radiology. I pull the best images of all the fractures and I get them all together. And then I actually illustrate. I draw with my pad and my pen. I draw the anatomy on top. And from that, now I have the injury. So this is the illustration of the injury. And from this is how I make normal. So when I work backwards. I start with the black and white injury. I draw the injury. And then from that, I am able to create the normal. So as a LNC on the stand or speaking with your attorney, this is what you want to start with. You want to start with normal. Begin with normal anatomy, set the stage, get everyone involved. This is your opportunity to sound like the expert, to teach what is the long bone in your thigh. Do you even need to use the word femur? What is your calf? What is your Achilles tendon? You think the jury is sitting there, look down on your legs. What does your right leg look like? And the inside of your right foot. This is what we're talking about is this right leg. Then once the jury understands the anatomy, then you show the crash. And now they're engaged. And now it's gross, it's interesting, it's traumatic. You can also put the leg in the scene if you have photographs. And of course, while you're talking and during testimony, all of this will come back to the medical record and the actual evidence of the fracture. Okay, so I wanted to show this because nobody likes this. Nobody wants a PowerPoint slide with a bunch of text. So if you are teaching and you are telling a story about a dog, we want to see the dog. And that is what your medical illustrator is here for. We will draw all of your dogs. I'm going to show this. So we have another example. I always like to include the client's face because the jury never loses sight of the fact that this is a person. So here we are again, normal anatomy. Take the opportunity to teach what is normal. What is the lumbar spine? What's the spinal cord? What's the cauda equina? What is this about? Then you show the injury. And of course, you want the injury to match your radiology. But there's also more to this story. There's always more. There's these scientific details, these small medical facts that sometimes come up in testimony. So you want to be able to talk about these in an engaging way. So this young woman, when she had her back fracture, she had a spinal cord injury, and it caused urine retention, and she was not able to eliminate urine. And then when they repaired the spine, when they fused it with the spinal hardware, the urine retention resolved. And so this is a nice way to show that, because the picture is worth 1,000 words. It makes it easier for the jury to understand, well, what's urine retention? You know, what is that? And then you're like, oh my God, you know, then they can probably equate that to something they have felt before. All right, this is another great trick. So sometimes in your medical records, you're going to have measurements and pathology reports with, you know, details of certain sizes. And in these cases, I like to put the medical illustration on a grid so that if you're nervous, or if you can't think of it, or if the page isn't in front of you, you have an ability to make a quick count, to remember small details that make you sound like you know absolutely everything that you're saying. So for this instance, we are going to start with normal anatomy. We're going to set the stage. We're going to talk about blood flow to the ureter, or sorry, to I can't even think right now, to the ovaries and to the uterus. Now, if you need to talk about the normal size of an ovary, you can sort of make this white box in your mind. So a normal ovary is roughly 2 by 3 centimeters. Then you can talk about your client. What did their uterus look like? What did their ovary look like? It was larger than 3 by 5 centimeters. And this woman, when she went into surgery, she said, if my ovaries are abnormal, please take them when you do the hysterectomy. And unfortunately, this was the surgery she received. And now the jury will understand why, after a hysterectomy, she has ovarian cancer. And this is also to scale on the grid of the size of what was found in her follow-up surgery. Okay, so more radiology. All cases have radiology. Always have your attorney request all the radiology, even if you think it's unnecessary, or even if it's a really weird study, or it's intraoperative fluoroscopy, all these things we want. I'm just going to make sure that I don't have anything here from Pat really quick. Okay. Because I see things popping up in the chat. Is this anything? I'm not going to peek at this really quick. Okay. So complex x-ray. There's a lot of crunchiness going on in this foot. This is what the illustration looks like. It's still pretty complex, especially if you are moving on from this to talk about the surgery to put this foot back together. So the trick here is to colorize the bones. So now what you can do is you can talk to the attorney, or you can talk to, well, the attorney and the jury in terms that they understand as a more of a lay audience. The green bone is your pinky bone, or look at the orange bone. What happens to the orange bone? And you can talk about an interarticular fracture. So now you can see what parts of what bones are fractured. And of course, this would align with your x-ray. All right, here's a really ugly image from, I'm afraid this is from an MRI. It's clearly not a CT. And I don't know if you can even kind of assemble what's going on here. This is definitely the lobe of a liver. If you stack all the images on top of each other, you get a little bit more detail. So you want your medical illustrator to illustrate this for you. Let's turn this into a picture worth 1,000 words. So here is your MRI. You can see the tumor. You can see how it compares to this. It's accurate. It is exactly what we see in the radiology scans. And also, like always, you want to start with normal. So you want to talk about the normal distal IVC. Then you want to show the tumor. Then you can start to talk about the difficulty in removing this tumor and the rest of the chronology and what happens to the client. Another tricky thing that comes up in so many cases is sensitive topics, sensitive anatomy. So not only can you use your medical illustration slides or boards, you can put words on them. So you essentially have a giant cue card, but you can also colorize things that are sensitive, so you almost don't even have to talk about them. So you can talk about numbness in the toes. You can talk about the sensation of pins and needles. And you can talk about the sensation of pain. And as you go on to talk about this client, you may not even have to talk about the genitalia, because what the difficulties and the problems there are illustrated. It can help take that burden off of you. All right, it's Halloween. All right, how are we on time? We're doing good. You got to show something gory when it's Halloween, right? So again, start with normal skull, and then we're going to fracture the skull. Unfortunately, this was a horrible assault case. We're going to take her into surgery, and then this is her post-op. Unfortunately, she has a very traumatic brain injury and is still with us, but is not really with us. And in this case, so we can see the fracture, right? We understand that the skull was fractured. But there's so much more three-dimensionally going on to this skull that in this case, we did a 3D print. So this means that as medical illustrators and animators, not only do we draw in 2D, but we can also do 3D animation and 3D printing. And we can take the CT of the client and turn it into a 3D model, and then fill in all the correct anatomy, and then actually send it through a printer and print this in plastic. So this is our skull. You can take the skull flap, the craniectomy, off, and you can see the bleed inside that's compressing the brain. You also see the 2 teeth. Her teeth were found in her stomach. And so we printed these and we kept them separate so the attorney could have them in his pocket. And when that part of testimony started, he could pull them out of his pocket and talk about her teeth. And you can see that the bleed also is removable to show the brain underneath. Then you pass it around to the jury so they can get engaged with this. And if you rotate the skull, you can see how complex the hard palate fracture was. Okay, how much time do we have? I think we have 12 minutes. So I'm going to go through one really quickly, and then we'll have time for question and answers. So this is another case, and I'm going to show you more of a volume of slides, because this is more of what you would get. You wouldn't just get 1 or 2 slides. You would get a whole series that go through a whole chronology. So I'm going to click through this so quickly, you'll be able to see how you can use this to tell a story. So we start with normal, and then we have a skull fracture. We have a left-sided epidural bleed with a right-sided contra-Q bleed intramural. So you're going to want to talk about how the middle meningeal artery is on the outside of the dura. The bleed begins here. The bleed grows. We're going to match it to radiology, of course. So this is the CT of the bleed. Then we're going to take this young woman into surgery. Her head is shaved. The skin is opened. the skull flap is opened. There's an interesting detail here that might be confusing to speak about. Her skull flap is kept inside of her abdomen to keep the bone viable. So here we are. They're going to remove the bleed, and then the brain bounces back into shape. And this is how she's left. And some time goes by. This gives you an opportunity to talk about pain and suffering, talk about how long she's in the hospital, family visiting, all of these sorts of things, maybe the different symptoms that her body is exhibiting. And then we go back to surgery sometime later, and we take that piece of bone flap out, and it is reconnected to her skull. And that is me. Take a screenshot of this again if you want to reach out, and I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see you. And I noticed some things popped up in the chat. I haven't looked at them yet. Can't get the chat to open. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Fascinating. Good. I love this. And Valerie has the book. Yay. Thank you. I love that. The book is a blast. And especially around Halloween, it's a great coffee table book because it's very gory. It has lots of pictures. But it's also a fun Christmas gift for your medical friends. Okay. Let's see. I can't see what's going on in the chat. Sorry. Okay. April, you have your hand up.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yay. Okay, so where do you get these illustrations from? Like, are you designing these, or is there a program? Or
I draw them. I literally draw them with my tablet. It's like a drawing tablet.
Okay.
I literally just draw them in Photoshop. So they're custom to every case.
Wow, that's amazing.
Thanks. There aren't very many of us. As Pat said in the introduction, there are only 4 medical schools that have a master's of illustration. And we graduate, between those 4 schools, we graduate 44 medical illustrators a year. And of those medical illustrators, most work in healthcare and publishing and surgical planning and textbooks and atlases, and you name it. Only 20% of us do litigation. So there are about 400 medical illustrators that work in litigation, specifically trauma, medical malpractice, for LNCs, for other medical experts, for lawyers. Oh, here's a question. How do we order your book? Amazon. Just go to Amazon and search Injury Illustrated. It's really easy. There's a paperback and a hardback. The paperback is significantly cheaper, and the hardback is usually a better print. It's prettier. Oh, Karen, there goes your gift card. Perfect.
It is a wonderful book to give to attorney clients because they specifically enjoy the stories, the illustrations, and the opportunities that that book presents.
Yes, yes. And the book not only talks about how to become a medical illustrator, the path to becoming a medical illustrator, but then why it's so critical for litigation teams to have a medical illustrator as part of the team to collaborate with all the way from the beginning to even help choose which experts we need. Okay, hand up from Debbie. Debbie, are you there?
Looks like Debbie might be.
I'm sorry.
Herself.
Thank you. I am just so amazed at what you just showed us. It's just incredible. I may have missed it in the beginning, though. What is your background and how did you get involved in this?
I was a pre-med major in undergrad and graduated and did not want to be a doctor, did not want to go to medical school, had no desire to be a surgeon. But I realized that someone had to draw all the pictures and all the books, all the atlases, even botany and molecular biology, DNA replication. Everything is taught with diagrams and illustrations. And it did take me a little while to figure out what medical illustration was as a career and to get into the school. And then I also did 6 months as an autopsy tech, which is just an unusual part of my background, which helps with drawing trauma.
Well, we're so lucky to hear you today. Thank you so much for everything.
Of course. Thank you so much. So here's a question. Do you just use Photoshop? From Diane. I mostly just work in Photoshop. I have a different radiology viewers that I use to manipulate radiology. And then I bring that into Photoshop. I'm almost always using Photoshop. I'll draw a little bit sometimes with pencil and scan it in. If I'm doing a 3D print, obviously we're using 3D software. This girl, actually, this is one where we did not 3D print the skull. I just used a Dremel drill to match the fractures on the CT on just a standard stock skull. And you can see this one has a good palate fracture as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So mostly Photoshop, unless I'm getting into 3D work. I saw another hand, Michelle.
Yes. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I think this is fascinating what you do. And from what you just said, it sounds like your background is a little bit more than what maybe most illustrators are. I was just wondering, like, what kind of courses did you have?
So in the medical illustration, okay, so when you get into the medical illustration program, you essentially begin as a first-year medical student at the medical school. We take gross anatomy with the medical students. We have all the same tests, all the same labs, all the same everything, except we also have to submit sketches as well. We took histology, neuroanatomy. We basically do everything except for hospital management, hospital ethics. We don't have to do any pharmacology. And then with all those courses, we're also taking traditional media, Photoshop, watercolor, and we're learning how to build websites, how to make 3D models, how to animate, all of these things. So it's a mixture of the first 2 years of medical school and a mixture of the traditional artwork. And then in the summer in between, we have all surgical observation. So we're allowed in the operating room, on the hospital, on campus, whenever we want, we can go. And we take sketches of all the operations that we see. And at the end of the summer, we have to turn one into a completely rendered illustration project. And then we also, we do surgery. So this is kind of fun. This is really interesting about the programs. As medical illustrators, they're never going to let us do surgery on humans, of course. But you have to learn how to suture to be able to draw suturing. You have to learn what a liver feels like to be able to draw what a liver looks like retracted. So we actually do our surgery on 40-pound pigs, and we get in pairs of 2. And as a team, we have to put our pig under anesthesia. And then we open our pig. We do a surgery that is non-detrimental. So you remove a kidney, or you do, I actually did an intestine surgery. Like, let's say the pig has a tumor in his ileum. So we removed that section of ileum and then reconnected the intestine, the digestive tract. And then you have to close your pig, and then your pig has to come out of anesthesia to pass. And, I did not lose my pig, but we did lose some pigs.
I'm glad I'm a vegan, but this is great.
We have time for one more question from Jane before we have to wrap up.
Okay. Oh, you're on mute. Jane, unmute.
Sorry. This is
okay.
like so fascinating. Like just your story about the pigs brought back terrible visions of the guinea pigs we had to do in college. But I'm just curious with the detail and the level of experience you have, do they have you testify at trial or are you doing the exhibits and things and
Right. So it's
Fine.
very, very rare for a medical illustrator to testify, which is excellent because that means that I can normally be sitting here in my pajamas and I can do all of the exhibits for whoever's going to testify. So I do the exhibits way in advance of trial. So I do them for the attorney to use in mediation and during depositions. And then I work directly with the testifying experts to make their illustrations exactly how they want them for either their depositions or their testimony. And for LNCs, I can do the illustrations for you as you want to present them, either in the beginning of the case when you're just summarizing the record, or when you're teaching the attorney, or when you're going to be on the stand, or for your summary. I can put illustrations in your summaries for you. So yeah, I don't have to be at trial. And I spend a lot of time on Zoom with a lot of different doctors, looking at a lot of radiology and a lot of medical records.
Wow. Thank you.
Of course.
Annie, I so appreciate what you have shared with us today. I know it has stimulated our listeners, and they're going to be looking at their cases a little bit differently, perhaps with that illustration in mind.
Yes.
Be sure to check in the chat and connect with Annie, get a copy of her book. We have the link in the chat. It is a fascinating read. I had a hard time putting it down and still remember some of the stories that I read over a year ago. Thank you so much, Annie.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
In our next episode, we're going to focus on something that makes people profoundly uncomfortable, and that is the idea that your trusted employees could be stealing from you. You'll learn in this podcast what are some of the warning signs that you might have an individual who is embezzling funds. I might add your hard-earned funds from your legal nurse consulting business, what you can do to prevent such an occurrence, and what you should do if you suspect that somebody is embezzling. This is an all too common and a hidden problem. I know several business owners who rather shamefaced admitted to me that they had employees who had embezzled from their company. Don't let this happen to you. Be proactive and learn about the signs and the risks in our next Legal Nurse podcast. Coming up next on Legal Nurse Podcast, when we focus on embezzlement.